The gunshot that shattered Clara Dalton's world didn't kill her husband, but watching him die slowly over 3 agonizing days while the fever from infection ravaged his body nearly destroyed her completely. That was 2 years ago in the dusty settlement of Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory, and she hadn't felt whole since. She stood behind the bar of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, pouring whiskey for men who looked through her rather than at her, which suited her fine. The year was 1878, and women like her, widowed and working in a saloon, occupied a strange space in frontier society. She wasn't a proper lady anymore, but she wasn't entirely fallen either. She existed in the margins, and that felt appropriate for someone who believed herself irreparably broken. The saloon doors swung open, letting in a blast of scorching afternoon heat and a stranger. Clara had seen countless cowboys drift through Fort Yuma, but something about this one made her pause mid-pour. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of winter sky. Dust covered his clothes and beard stubble shadowed his jaw. He carried himself with the careful awareness of a man who'd survived by paying attention. He approached the bar, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature gray at the temples. "Water first, if you don't mind," he said, his voice rough from trail dust. "Then whiskey." Clara nodded, reaching for the pitcher. Their fingers brushed when she handed him the glass, and she pulled back as if burned. He didn't seem to notice, drinking deeply before setting the empty glass down with a satisfied sigh. "You serving food?" he asked. "Kitchen's in the back. Stew and bread. Nothing fancy." "Sounds like heaven compared to what I've been eating." He smiled, and it transformed his weathered face. "Name's Harrison Wells. I'll be working at the Copper Ridge Ranch starting tomorrow. Figured I'd get my bearings in town first." "Clara Dalton," she replied automatically, then wished she hadn't given her name. She didn't want connections, didn't want conversations that went beyond business transactions. But Harrison didn't seem inclined to move along. He settled onto a bar stool, stretching his long legs. "You the owner. Just work here. I'll get your food." She escaped to the kitchen, her heart beating faster than it should. When she returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread, Harrison was examining the painting behind the bar, a garish thing depicting a bullfight that the previous owner had hung years ago. "Thank you," he said when she set the food before him. He ate with the methodical efficiency of a hungry man, but not without manners. Between bites, he asked, "How long have you lived in Fort Yuma?" "4 years." She busied herself wiping down the already clean bar. "Like it? It's a place." He studied her with those unsettling blue eyes. "That's a careful answer." "It's an honest one." She felt him watching her as she moved through her routine, refilling drinks for the other patrons, exchanging brief words with the regulars. When she returned to collect his empty bowl, he spoke again. "I don't mean to be forward, Mrs. Dalton, but you seem like you're carrying the weight of the world. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm a decent listener." Clara's hand tightened on the bowl. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right. I apologize." He stood, placing coins on the bar. "Thank you for the meal and the water." She watched him leave, disturbed by the encounter in ways she couldn't name. The rest of her shift passed in a blur, and when she finally locked up and walked to her small room at the boarding house 3 streets over, she couldn't stop thinking about winter blue eyes and a stranger's kindness. The following weeks established a pattern Clara both anticipated and dreaded. Harrison came to the Lucky Dollar every Saturday evening after his week at Copper Ridge Ranch. He always ordered the same thing, always spoke politely, and gradually, despite her best efforts, she began to look forward to seeing him. "You're mellowing," observed Rosie, one of the saloon girls, as she watched Clara actually smile at something Harrison said. That cowboy's gotten under your skin. Don't be ridiculous, Clara said, but her protest lacked conviction. When's the last time you let yourself be happy, honey? Your husband's been dead 2 years. The words, though true, landed like a blow. I can't, Clara said quietly. I can't be what anyone needs. I'm too broken for that. Rosie shook her head but didn't argue, moving away to tend to other customers. Clara felt Harrison's gaze on her and forced herself to meet his eyes. Everything all right? He asked. Fine. She poured him another whiskey without being asked. You know, he said conversationally, at Copper Ridge there's this horse. Beautiful paint mare, maybe 5 years old. Someone broke her badly before the ranch bought her. She'd been beaten, starved, worked half to death. When she arrived, she'd kick and bite anyone who came near. Clara found herself listening despite her intention to remain detached. The foreman wanted to sell her for meat, Harrison continued. Said she was too dangerous, too damaged. But the owner's daughter, she saw something worth saving. Spent months just sitting in the corral with that mare, not asking anything, just being present. Why are you telling me this? Because that mare, the one everyone said was ruined beyond repair, she let the girl ride her last week. Gentle as could be. Turns out she wasn't broken. She was just waiting for someone who wouldn't try to fix her, someone who'd accept her as she was. Clara's throat tightened. Horses aren't people. No, Harrison agreed. But hurt is hurt, and healing is healing, regardless of the species. She turned away before he could see the tears threatening to spill. When she'd composed herself and turned back, he was watching her with an expression that held understanding and something deeper, something that terrified her. I should tell you, she said, needing him to understand why this, whatever this was, couldn't continue. My husband, Thomas, he was a good man. We came out here because he wanted to start fresh, build something. Then one night, 3 men tried to rob the general store where he worked. Thomas fought back and one of them shot him. Harrison remained silent, letting her speak. The bullet went through his side. Doc thought he'd be fine, but infection set in. I watched him burn with fever, watched him suffer, and I couldn't do anything. When he died, something in me died too. I can't love again. I won't survive losing someone else. So you've decided to just stop living instead? The question, asked gently, struck deep. I'm surviving. That's not the same thing. Harrison leaned forward. Clara, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. But I am asking you to stop punishing yourself for being alive. You don't understand. Maybe not. But I understand loneliness. I understand being so afraid of hurt that you wall yourself off from everything good. He paused. My wife and daughter died of cholera 5 years ago. Clara's breath caught. Harrison, I'm sorry. For a long time I was like you. I worked, I existed, but I wasn't living. Then one day I realized that Sarah, my wife, would have hated seeing me like that. She loved life, loved joy. By refusing to embrace either, I wasn't honoring her memory. I was insulting it. It's not that simple. No, it's not. Nothing about grief is simple. He stood, leaving money on the bar. But you get to choose, Clara. You can let the hurt define you forever, or you can decide that maybe, just maybe, you deserve to be happy again. After he left, Clara stood in the empty saloon, his words echoing in her mind. That night, for the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to cry, really cry. Not the silent tears she occasionally shed, but great, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. The next Saturday, when Harrison arrived, Clara met him with something she rarely showed anyone, a genuine smile. The stew's particularly good today, she said. His answering grin made her heart skip. Then I'll have a double portion. They talked more that evening than they ever had before. Harrison told her about growing up in Missouri, about learning to handle horses from his grandfather, about the wandering path that had eventually brought him to Arizona territory. Clara found herself sharing memories of her childhood in Ohio, of meeting Thomas at a church social, of their early dreams before reality proved harsher than anticipated. "You regret coming west?" Harrison asked. Clara considered the question. "I regret how it ended. But no, I don't regret the journey. Thomas was happy here, at least for a while. That matters. You're stronger than you think, or more stubborn than I should be." He laughed, a warm sound that made several heads turn. "Stubborn's good. Stubborn keeps you alive out here." As the weeks passed into months, Clara felt something shifting inside her, like ice beginning to thaw after a long winter. Harrison never pushed, never demanded more than she could give, but his steady presence became a constant in her life. She caught herself thinking about him during the week, wondering what he was doing at Copper Ridge, looking forward to Saturday evenings with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. One particularly hot September evening, a fight broke out in the saloon. Two miners, drunk and angry over a card game, started throwing punches. Clara had seen worse, but when one pulled a knife, Harrison moved with startling speed. He caught the man's wrist, twisted efficiently, and had him disarmed before the blade could do damage. "Take it outside," Harrison said, his voice carrying authority. "The lady doesn't need blood on her floors." The miners, sobered by his intervention, stumbled out into the night. Clara realized her hands were shaking. "You all right?" Harrison asked, approaching the bar. "I'm fine. Thank you for stopping that. Couldn't let anything happen to my favorite bartender." He said it lightly, but his eyes held warmth that made her breath catch. "Your only bartender, you mean? My only favorite one." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Clara wanted to step forward, wanted to close the distance, but fear held her back. Harrison seemed to understand. "I should go. Early day tomorrow." After he left, Clara found herself staring at the doors, wondering when exactly this cowboy had become so essential to her world. The turning point came on a cold October morning. Clara was walking to the Mercantile when she saw Harrison riding into town, but something was wrong. He was hunched in the saddle, favoring his left side, and when he dismounted, he nearly fell. "Harrison," she ran to him, propriety forgotten. "What happened?" "Nothing serious," he said through gritted teeth. "Horse spooked at a rattler, threw me into a fence, just bruised. You need the doctor." "I need to sit down for a minute." She got her shoulder under his arm, supporting his weight as they made their way to the doctor's office. Doc Patterson examined him, pronounced nothing broken but ordered rest, then left them alone in the examining room. "You scared me," Clara said, her voice sharper than intended. Harrison looked up, surprised. "I'm all right. You could have been killed. That fence could have broken your neck, or the horse could have trampled you, or—" She stopped, hearing herself, hearing the raw fear in her voice. "Clara, I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't care about someone again, can't risk losing someone else." He reached for her hand, wincing at the movement. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that. Thomas didn't plan to die. Your wife didn't plan to die, but they did, and we were left behind, and it hurt so much I wanted to die too." "I know." He squeezed her fingers. "I know exactly how much it hurt because I felt the same way. But Clara, I also know that Sarah would have wanted me to live, really live, not just go through the motions. And I think Thomas would want the same for you. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken." His voice was firm. "You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken means beyond repair. Hurt means healing is possible." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so afraid." "So am I." He pulled her closer, ignoring his injuries. "I'm terrified that you'll never let me in, that you'll keep punishing yourself for surviving. But I'm also hopeful because I see the way you look at me sometimes, and I think maybe, just maybe, You're starting to believe you deserve to be happy. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. She let herself lean into him, careful of his bruises, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself imagine a future that held more than mere survival. That evening, instead of going to the saloon, Clara sat with Harrison at the boarding house while he rested. They talked quietly about everything and nothing. He told her about his daughter, Emma, who'd been 6 when she died, who'd loved horses and singing and making flower crowns. Clara shared memories of Thomas that she'd kept locked away, remembering not just his death but his life, the way he'd laughed at his own terrible jokes, how he'd always burned the coffee, his dreams of building a ranch someday. "He sounds like he was a good man," Harrison said. "He was. And your Sarah sounds like she was a wonderful woman." "She was." He paused. "But they're gone and we're still here. We get to choose what to do with the time we have left." Clara looked at this man who'd somehow slipped past her defenses, who'd shown her that maybe broken wasn't forever. "I want to try," she said softly. "I'm still scared, but I want to try." Harrison's smile was like sunrise. "That's all I'm asking." They took it slowly, building on the foundation of friendship they'd already established. Harrison came to town more often, sometimes just to walk with Clara in the early evening when the heat had lessened. They talked about their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. He told her about his plan to eventually buy his own piece of land, start a horse ranch. She admitted that she'd always wanted to learn to read better, that Thomas had been teaching her before he died. "I could help with that," Harrison offered. "I'm no scholar, but I can read well enough." So they added evening reading lessons to their routine. Harrison would arrive with a newspaper or a dime novel, and they'd sit in the boarding house parlor, heads bent together over the pages. Clara proved a quick student, her determination overcoming her initial frustration. "You're doing great," Harrison encouraged as she worked through a particularly difficult passage. "I sound like a child." "You sound like someone who's learning. There's no shame in that." She looked up at him, struck by his patience, his unwavering support. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness, Clara. You always have." The first time he kissed her, it was December, and Fort Yuma was experiencing one of its rare cold snaps. They'd been walking back from the mercantile, Clara's arms full of supplies for the saloon. Harrison had insisted on carrying most of them, leaving her with just a small package. "You don't have to do that," she protested. "I know. I want to." They'd paused outside the boarding house, and suddenly, Clara was very aware of how close they were standing, how his breath misted in the cool air, how his eyes reflected the lamplight from the windows. "Clara," he said, his voice low. "Can I kiss you?" Her heart hammered. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of her solitude. But a larger part, the part that had been slowly awakening over the past months, wanted to step forward into possibility. "Yes," she whispered. He set down the packages carefully, then cupped her face with gentle hands. When his lips met hers, it was tender and patient, asking rather than demanding. Clara felt something inside her, some last wall of resistance, begin to crumble. She kissed him back, letting herself feel, letting herself want. When they parted, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know it might be too soon to say it, but I do. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your determination to survive even when you wanted to give up. I love who you are, Clara, broken pieces and all." The words she'd been holding back, afraid to speak, tumbled out. "I can't be fixed," she said, needing him to understand. "I'll always carry this grief, this fear. I'll never be the carefree woman I might have been before Thomas died." Harrison smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You don't need fixing, just love. And I have plenty of that to give." Something broke open inside Clara then, some dam that had been holding back 2 years of pain and loneliness and desperate hope. She wrapped her arms around Harrison and held on tight, feeling his solid warmth, his steady heartbeat, his absolute presence. "I love you too," she said into his shoulder. "God help me, I love you too." They stood there in the cold December air, holding each other, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. The engagement, when Harrison proposed on Christmas Eve, surprised no one in Fort Yuma. The town had watched their courtship with interest, particularly the regulars at the Lucky Dollar who'd seen Clara transform from a woman going through the motions to someone who smiled, who laughed, who'd rediscovered joy. Harrison had saved for months to buy her a ring, a simple gold band with a small garnet. "It's not much," he said as he knelt in the saloon after closing when it was just the two of them. "It's perfect," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "It's absolutely perfect." They married in February of 1879, a small ceremony at the Fort Yuma Chapel with Rosie and Doc Patterson standing as witnesses. Clara wore a simple blue dress, not white, feeling that would be inappropriate for a second marriage. Harrison wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes bright with happiness. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with a tenderness that promised a lifetime of such moments. Clara kissed him back, no longer afraid of the depth of her feelings, no longer convinced that love meant inevitable loss. The wedding night was gentle, both of them nervous despite their previous marriages. Harrison took his time, asking permission with every touch, making sure Clara felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together, it felt like a homecoming, like two wounded souls finding refuge in each other. Afterward, lying in Harrison's arms in the small house he'd rented for them, Clara felt peace settle over her for the first time in years. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm happy. That I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again." "I know what you mean," he kissed her forehead. "I spent so long just existing. You brought me back to life, Clara." "We brought each other back," she corrected. They built a life together in the months that followed. Harrison continued working at Copper Ridge Ranch while saving money toward his dream of his own place. Clara kept working at the Lucky Dollar, though the owner had hinted that if she wanted to stop, Harrison's wages were enough to support them both. "You want me to quit?" she asked Harrison one evening over dinner. "I want you to do whatever makes you happy," he replied. "If working at the saloon gives you satisfaction, keep doing it. If you'd rather focus on other things, that's fine too. This is your decision." She loved that about him, that he never tried to control or limit her. "I think I'd like to keep working for now. Maybe not forever, but for now." "Then that's what you'll do." In May, Clara realized she'd missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was stress or perhaps an early change of life, though at 26 she was young for that. But when she missed a second month and began feeling queasy in the mornings, she couldn't deny the possibility. Doc Patterson confirmed it. "You're pregnant, Mrs. Wells." "I'd say about 3 months along, which puts the baby arriving sometime in late October or early November." Clara sat in stunned silence. She and Thomas had tried for children without success, and she'd assumed she was barren. The possibility of a baby now felt both miraculous and terrifying. "Are you all right?" Doc Patterson asked kindly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never thought this would happen." "Well, it has. You're healthy, and I see no reason why you shouldn't carry to term just fine. Take care of yourself, don't overdo it, and come see me if anything feels wrong." She walked home in a daze, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. By the time Harrison arrived that evening, she'd gone through a dozen different emotions, ending somewhere between joy and terror. "Clara, what's wrong?" He took one look at her face and immediately pulled her into his arms. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. She felt him go still, then he pulled back to look at her, his eyes wide. "You're certain?" Doc Patterson confirmed it this afternoon. "That's wonderful." He started to smile, then caught her expression. "Isn't it wonderful? I don't know. Harrison, I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose the baby, or what if something happens to you, or—" He put a gentle finger on her lips. "Stop. Stop borrowing trouble from tomorrow. Right now, today, we have this blessing. Let's celebrate it. How can you not be afraid?" "Oh, I'm terrified," he admitted. "I'm thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the ways the world could hurt us. But I'm also thinking about holding our child, teaching them to ride, watching them grow. The fear doesn't go away, Clara, but it doesn't have to control us either." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I want this baby so much. I'm just so afraid of losing it. I know. We'll be afraid together, and we'll be hopeful together, and whatever happens, we'll face it together." As her pregnancy progressed, Clara felt her fear slowly transform into cautious joy. Harrison was attentive without being overbearing, helping her when she needed it but not treating her like she was fragile. He talked to her growing belly at night, telling stories about his day, singing old songs his mother had taught him. "You're going to be a wonderful father," Clara said one evening, watching him rest his hand on her swollen stomach. "You think so? I know so. You're patient and kind and loving. Our child is lucky to have you." "Our child is lucky to have both of us," he corrected. In August, Harrison came home with exciting news. "The owner of Copper Ridge is selling off some parcels of land. There's a piece, about 40 acres, with a small creek running through it. It's perfect for horses, Clara, and he's willing to sell it to me for a price I can almost afford." "How much more do you need?" He named a figure that made her wince. It was more than they could save in years. "What if I sold my shares in the Lucky Dollar?" she suggested. When the previous owner had died, he'd left small shares to all the long-term employees. Clara's wasn't worth much, but it was something. "That's your security," Harrison protested. "No, you're my security. You and this baby and the life we're building. I want the ranch, Harrison. I want us to have our own place before the baby comes." After much discussion, they decided to combine Clara's shares with Harrison's savings and take a loan from the bank for the remainder. By September, they owned 40 acres of Arizona territory, complete with a small but sturdy house, a barn that needed repair, and endless possibility. They moved in on a Saturday, their few possessions fitting easily into the wagon Harrison borrowed from Copper Ridge. Clara stood in the doorway of their new home, her hand on her belly, and felt hope bloom in her chest. "What do you think?" Harrison asked, coming up behind her. "I think it's perfect. I think this is where our family begins." He wrapped his arms around her, his hands resting on their child. "I love you, Clara Wells. I love you too, Harrison Wells, more than I ever thought possible." The baby, a son they named Jacob Thomas Wells, arrived on November 3rd during a rare rainstorm. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara's old fears resurged, when she was certain something would go wrong. But Harrison stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, reminding her to breathe. When Jacob finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Clara wept with relief and joy. "He's beautiful," Harrison said, his own eyes wet as he held his son for the first time. "He's absolutely beautiful." Clara watched her husband cradle their child with such tenderness, and she realized something profound. She'd spent so long believing she was broken, that the grief and loss had damaged her beyond repair. But looking at her small family, at the life she and Harrison had built together, she understood that she'd never been broken at all. She'd been hurt, yes, damaged, certainly, but not broken, never broken. Because broken things couldn't heal, couldn't grow, couldn't love with the fierce intensity she felt for the man beside her and the child in his arms. Broken things stayed shattered, but hurt things, wounded things they could mend. Not perfectly, perhaps. The scars would always be there, reminders of what she'd survived. But those scars were proof of her strength, evidence that she'd endured and overcome. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked, that familiar question he'd asked so many times over the past year. "That you were right," she said softly. "I didn't need fixing, I just needed love. We both did." He leaned down to kiss her gently. "And we found it." The years that followed were filled with the ordinary magic of daily life. They built up the ranch slowly, carefully, Harrison's skill with horses earning them a reputation that brought buyers from across the territory. Clara proved to have a gift for handling the business side, managing their accounts and negotiating prices with a sharp mind that surprised even her. Jacob grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved the horses almost as much as his father did. When he was 3, Clara discovered she was pregnant again, and though the old fears tried to resurface, they were easier to manage now. Experience had taught her that while bad things could happen, good things could too. Their daughter, Sarah Emma, arrived in the spring of 1883, named for Harrison's first wife and daughter. Clara had suggested it, knowing that honoring his past didn't diminish their present. Sarah was a calm baby, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes that reminded Clara of her own mother. By 1885, the ranch was thriving. They'd built a larger barn, expanded the house to accommodate their growing family, and established themselves as one of the premier horse breeders in Arizona territory. Harrison's patience and skill produced horses that were steady, reliable, and sought after by ranchers and the army alike. One evening in late summer, Clara stood on their porch watching the sun set over their land. Jacob, now 6, was helping Harrison tend to the horses. Sarah toddled around the yard, chasing butterflies with the single-minded determination of a 2-year-old. This was her life now. Not the one she'd imagined when she was young, not the future she'd planned with Thomas. But it was good, rich and full and deeply satisfying. Harrison finished with the horses and walked over, Jacob at his side. "Ready for dinner?" "Almost. I was just thinking." "About what?" She gestured to encompass everything, the ranch, their children, the life they'd built. "About how none of this was what I expected. When Thomas died, I thought my story was over. I thought the best I could hope for was to survive, to get through each day without falling apart completely. And now I know that surviving isn't enough. I want to live, Harrison, really live. And I get to because you showed me it was possible." He put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "You showed me the same thing. We saved each other, Clara." Jacob tugged on Harrison's shirt. "Papa, I'm hungry." "Then let's eat," Harrison said, laughing. They went inside together, their small family, and Clara felt gratitude wash over her. Yes, she'd loved before and lost. Yes, the grief would always be part of her story. But it wasn't the whole story, wasn't the ending she'd once feared it would be. The ending, she was learning, could be written differently. Could be written with love and hope and the courage to try again. That night, after the children were asleep and she and Harrison lay in bed together, Clara spoke into the darkness. "Do you ever think about them? Sarah and Emma?" "Every day," he admitted. "Not with the same sharp pain as before, but yes, they're part of me. Thomas is part of me too. I don't talk about him much anymore, but I remember." "That's good. They deserve to be remembered." He pulled her closer. "But I'm grateful that you found room in your heart for me too." "My heart's bigger than I thought it was," Clara said. "Turns out loss doesn't make it smaller. It just makes the love we still have more precious." In 1887, Clara discovered she was pregnant for the third time. At 33, she'd thought they were done having children, but life had a way of surprising her. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, perhaps because she was older, perhaps because she was busier chasing after two active children and helping run the ranch. But in April of 1888, their second daughter was born. They named her Rose, after Rosie from the Lucky Dollar, who'd been one of Clara's few friends during those dark years after Thomas's death. Rose was a loud, demanding baby who made her presence known from day one. Clara, exhausted and sore and utterly in love, looked at her newborn daughter and marveled at how full her life had become. 3 children, Harrison said wonderingly, holding Rose while Clara rested. We're outnumbered now. Good thing we have each other, Clara replied. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Jacob showed an early aptitude for training horses, working alongside his father with a patience unusual in someone so young. Sarah was quieter, content with books and helping her mother with the household accounts. Rose, true to her dramatic entrance, was bold and adventurous, always getting into scrapes and emerging with scraped knees and wide grins. When Jacob turned 15 in 1893, Harrison began teaching him the finer points of horse breeding. Clara watched them work together, heads bent over a mare they were training, and felt her heart swell with pride. This was Harrison's legacy being passed to the next generation. He's good with them, she commented to Harrison that evening. He is, better than I was at his age. Harrison smiled. He's talking about wanting to expand, maybe start breeding for specific traits. What do you think? I think he's got good instincts, and I think the ranch can support it, thanks to your management. Clara had indeed proven herself an astute businesswoman. While Harrison handled the horses, she managed their finances, negotiated contracts, and even began investing in other ventures. The girl who'd once thought herself uneducated had learned to read complex contracts and do mathematical calculations that would have baffled her younger self. By 1895, the Wells Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory. They'd weathered droughts and market downturns, disease outbreaks among the stock, and the occasional dispute with neighbors. Through it all, Clara and Harrison had faced each challenge as they'd promised on that cold December night so long ago together. On their 16th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Clara with a trip to Tucson. They left the children with a neighbor and spent 3 days in the growing city, eating at restaurants, staying in a hotel, acting like the young couple they'd never quite been. "This is nice," Clara said as they walked through the streets, her hand in his. "But I miss the children." "Me too," Harrison admitted. "When did we become the kind of people who miss their children after 3 days? When we became parents, I suppose." That night in their hotel room, they made love with the leisure of people who didn't have to worry about being interrupted. Afterward, Clara rested her head on Harrison's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I've been thinking," she said, "about getting older, about what comes next. Getting philosophical in your old age," he teased. Clara was 42 now, Harrison 48, no longer young but not yet old either. "Maybe, but I look at our life, at everything we've built, and I just feel grateful. You gave me so much, Harrison." "We gave each other so much," he corrected, as he always did. "Remember what I told you that first time we really talked, that I couldn't be fixed? I remember. I was wrong. Not about being broken, exactly, but about what that meant. I thought broken was permanent, that I'd never be whole again. But you showed me that being broken just meant I needed time to heal, and that healing didn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "You did the same for me. I was so closed off when I came to Fort Yuma, so determined not to feel anything. You showed me it was safe to love again. "It's never completely safe," Clara said. "We could lose each other tomorrow. One of the children could get hurt, the ranch could fail, any number of terrible things could happen. But they haven't, and even if they did, we'd face them together. That's what love is, Clara, not the absence of fear, but the courage to love anyway." They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly, Jacob having managed things with a competence that both impressed and slightly worried Clara. Her baby was growing up, becoming a man. "He asked me about courting the Henderson girl," Harrison told her a few weeks after their return. "Lily, she's sweet. What did you tell him?" "That he should talk to you first," Clara laughed. "Passing the difficult conversation to me. I figured you'd handle it better." Harrison grinned. "Besides, you're better with words than I am." She did talk to Jacob, a slightly awkward but ultimately touching conversation about respect and responsibility, and treating any young woman he courted with the utmost care. Jacob listened seriously, then asked, "Is that how you and Papa are, respectful and careful with each other?" "Always," Clara said. "Even when we disagree, we treat each other with love. Then that's what I want too." The years continued their steady march. Jacob did court Lily Henderson, and in 1898, at the age of 19, he married her in a ceremony at the ranch. Clara cried through the entire thing, so proud and so aware of time's passage. Sarah, at 16, showed no interest in courting, preferring her books and the ranch accounts. "Maybe I'll never marry," she told Clara. "Maybe I'll just stay here and help run things." "You'll do whatever makes you happy," Clara said, echoing Harrison's words from so long ago. "There's no rule that says you have to marry." Rose, at 11, was still more interested in horses and adventure than anything else. She rode like she'd been born in the saddle, fearless and skilled. In 1899, Arizona Territory was changing rapidly. Railroads were expanding, bringing more people and more commerce. The wild frontier of Clara's early years was becoming tamer, more settled. Fort Yuma was growing into a real town, with schools and churches and even a small library. "Sometimes I miss the old days," Harrison said one evening, "when it was rougher, wilder." "Do you really?" Clara asked. "Or do you just miss being young?" He laughed. "Maybe the latter, though I don't mind being older if it means I got to spend all these years with you." Flatterer. Truth teller. In 1900, as the new century dawned, the Wells family gathered to celebrate. Jacob and Lily had given Clara and Harrison their first grandchild, a boy named Henry. Sarah, now 18, had surprised everyone by accepting a teaching position at the Fort Yuma school. Rose, at 13, was already talking about wanting to breed horses like her father and brother. "We've done all right, haven't we?" Harrison said, watching their children and grandchild. "We've done more than all right," Clara replied. "We've built something beautiful." That summer, Rosie from the Lucky Dollar came to visit. She was older now, retired from saloon work and running a boarding house in Yuma. She and Clara sat on the porch, drinking lemonade and watching the horses. "You remember when you first came to work at the Lucky Dollar?" Rosie asked. "You were like a ghost, just going through the motions. I remember, I felt dead inside. And look at you now. Happy, successful, surrounded by family. It's like you're a different person." Clara thought about that. "Not different, just healed. Harrison used to say I wasn't broken, just hurt. Took me a long time to believe him. He's a good man, that husband of yours. The best." As Rosie left, she hugged Clara tightly. "You deserve all this happiness, honey. Don't ever forget that." The years of the new century brought changes and challenges. Drought in 1903 tested their water resources, but the creek on their property kept flowing, saving their stock when neighboring ranches struggled. In 1905, a disease outbreak threatened their horses, but Harrison's careful husbandry and Clara's quick action in quarantining the sick animals prevented major losses. Through it all, they leaned on each other, their partnership as strong as ever. They'd long since stopped thinking of themselves as two individuals, and instead moved through life as a unit, each complementing the other's strengths and supporting their weaknesses. When Harrison turned 60 in 1907, Clara organized a celebration that brought together their entire extended family. Jacob and Lily now had 3 children. Sarah had married a fellow teacher and moved to Phoenix, though she visited often. Rose, at 20, was working on breeding a new line of horses specifically suited to the desert climate. 60 years, Harrison said that night, lying in bed beside Clara. I never thought I'd live this long. Don't talk like that, Clara scolded. You've got plenty of years left. I hope so. I want to see Rose married, want to meet more grandchildren, want to spend every possible moment with you, she snuggled closer. Then plan on sticking around for a good long while. In 1910, Clara turned 56, and for the first time in years, she found herself thinking about Thomas. Not with the sharp grief of early loss, but with gentle nostalgia. She wondered what he'd think of the life she'd built, if he'd approve of Harrison, if he'd be proud of the woman she'd become. You're quiet, Harrison observed. Everything all right, just thinking about the past, about Thomas. If he felt any jealousy, it didn't show, missing him, in a way. Mostly just grateful that I knew him, that I had that love, even though it ended too soon. He was a good man, Harrison. You would have liked him. I'm sure I would have. He paused. You know I don't mind when you think about him, right? He was important to you. He helped make you who you are. You're a remarkable man, Harrison Wells. I'm a man who knows that love isn't finite. You loving him doesn't mean you love me less. She kissed him, this man who'd saved her without trying to fix her, who'd loved her through grief and fear and stubborn resistance. I love you more than words can express. Good thing you've got a lifetime to show me then. By 1915, the ranch was in the capable hands of Jacob and Rose, who'd formed a successful partnership. Jacob handled the training and breeding, while Rose managed the business side with a shrewdness that rivaled her mother's. Harrison, now 68, had mostly retired, though he still worked with the horses when the mood struck. Clara, at 62, had also stepped back from daily operations. She spent her time reading, tending her garden, and spoiling her 7 grandchildren. Sometimes she volunteered at the Fort Yuma Library, helping others learn to read just as she once had. One afternoon, she was reading on the porch when Harrison joined her, moving a bit stiffly these days but still strong. "What are you reading?" he asked. She showed him the book, a collection of poems. "Listen to this one. It's about love enduring through hardship." She read aloud, her voice steady and clear, so different from the halting reader she'd been all those years ago. When she finished, Harrison was quiet. "That's beautiful," he said finally. "Reminds me of us." "Everything reminds you of us," she teased. "Can you blame me? We're a good story. We are, aren't we?" She set the book aside. "From broken widow and grieving widower to this, it's quite a journey. The best journey of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. After all these years, they could still find contentment in simply being together. No words necessary. In 1918, the world was at war, though it felt distant from their Arizona ranch. Their oldest grandson had enlisted despite the family's worry, and they prayed nightly for his safety. When news came that he'd been wounded but would recover, Clara wept with relief. "War is terrible," she said to Harrison. "All that loss, all that grief. But people survive it," he said gently. "Just like we survived our losses. Humans are more resilient than we think." She knew he was right. She was living proof of that resilience, of the human capacity to endure and heal and love again. By 1920, Harrison's health was beginning to fail. Nothing dramatic, just the slow accumulation of years taking their toll. He moved slower, tired more easily, sometimes forgot things. Clara watched it with sadness but also with acceptance. They'd had 40 wonderful years together. However much time remained, she'd be grateful for it. One spring morning, Harrison didn't come in for breakfast. Clara found him in the barn, sitting on a hay bale, clutching his chest. "Harrison," she ran to him, terror flooding through her. "I'm all right," he said, but his face was gray. "Just need to catch my breath." Doc Patterson, now ancient himself, confirmed it was a heart problem. "He needs rest, no stress, gentle activity only," the doctor said. For the first time in their marriage, Harrison argued with Clara. "I can't just stop working. The horses need me. The horses have Jacob and Rose. They need you to be healthy more than they need you in the barn." "Clara." "No." She was firm. "You took care of me when I was broken. Now it's my turn to take care of you." He grumbled but obeyed, spending his days reading, whittling, playing with his grandchildren. Gradually, his color improved, and while he never regained his former strength, he stabilized. "You're a tyrant," he told Clara one evening. "I'm your wife, and I love you, and I'm not ready to lose you yet." His expression softened. "I'm not ready to leave you either. I'll try to stick around a bit longer." "Good. We have more life to live together." They settled into a new rhythm, quieter than before but no less rich. They took slow walks around the property, watched sunsets, told stories to their grandchildren. Clara read aloud to Harrison every evening, everything from newspapers to novels to poetry. On their 42nd anniversary in 1921, their children threw them a party. The ranch house overflowed with family, 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, the newest additions. Looking around at all these lives they'd helped create and nurture, Clara felt overwhelming gratitude. "What's wrong?" Harrison asked, seeing tears on her cheeks. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I'm just so grateful for all of this, for you, for our life together." He took her hand, the same hand he'd held so many times over the years. "Remember when you told me you couldn't be fixed?" "I remember. You were right, you know. You didn't need fixing. You just needed time and love and the courage to try again. And look what you built with that courage." She looked around at their family, their ranch, the life they'd created from grief and hope. "We built it together." "Always together," he agreed. In 1923, Harrison's heart finally gave out. He died peacefully in his sleep, Clara beside him as she'd been for 44 years. The grief was sharp and deep, but different from when she'd lost Thomas. This time, she didn't feel broken. She felt sad, yes, and lonely, but also grateful for every moment they'd shared. At the funeral, Clara stood before their assembled family and spoke. "Harrison taught me that being hurt isn't the same as being broken. He showed me that love doesn't fix us. It gives us the strength to heal ourselves. I loved him for 44 years, and I'll love him for whatever time I have left. But I won't let grief destroy me, because that would dishonor everything he believed about resilience and hope." She lived another 7 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She spent her time gardening, reading, helping Rose with the ranch accounts, and telling anyone who'd listen about the cowboy who'd loved her back to life. On a warm October evening in 1930, Clara Dalton Wells died in her sleep at the age of 76. Her last thoughts were of Harrison, of Thomas, of all the love she'd been privileged to experience in her long life. At her funeral, Rose read from her mother's journal, entries Clara had written over the years. The final entry, written just days before her death, read, "I spent so many years believing I was broken, that grief had shattered me beyond repair. But Harrison taught me the most important lesson of my life. We don't need to be fixed. We just need to be loved, and to have the courage to love in return. I've had two great loves in my life, Thomas, who showed me joy, and Harrison, who showed me that joy could return even after terrible loss. I've been blessed beyond measure, and I die grateful for every moment, every tear, every laugh, every heartbeat of this beautiful, difficult, precious life. The Wells Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations. Jacob's children and Rose's children worked it together, maintaining the legacy their grandparents had built. They told stories about Clara and Harrison, about the broken widow and the patient cowboy who'd found healing in each other's arms. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind whispered through the barn, workers swore they could hear two voices, laughing together like young lovers, forever intertwined, forever whole, forever home. The legacy wasn't just the land or the horses or the successful business. It was the lesson that Clara and Harrison had lived so fully, that being broken isn't permanent, that healing is possible, and that love, offered freely and accepted courageously, can transform even the deepest grief into hope. Their great-great-grandchildren still run the ranch today, in a world Harrison and Clara could never have imagined. But the core truth they discovered together remains timeless. We are all wounded by life in various ways, but those wounds don't define us unless we let them. With love, with patience, with the courage to remain open to possibility even after loss, we can heal. Not perfectly, perhaps. The scars remain. But we can build beautiful lives on the foundation of those scars, lives rich with meaning and connection and joy. Clara's story began with loss and proceeded through grief to a hard-won happiness. It's a reminder that our lowest moments don't have to be our final ones, that redemption and renewal are always possible, that we are never so broken that we can't be made whole again through love. Not because love fixes us, but because it gives us the strength to fix ourselves, to stand back up, to try again, to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. That's what Harrison gave Clara, not a repair job, but a safe space to heal. And that's what she gave him in return. Their story is one of countless such stories, of people who thought themselves beyond help, beyond hope, beyond happiness, who discovered that with love and courage and time, they could build lives that honored both their past pain and their present joy. The desert remembers them still, the broken woman who learned she didn't need fixing and the cowboy who loved her exactly as she was. Their ranch stands as testament to what's possible when two wounded souls choose healing over despair, connection over isolation, love over fear. And in the end, that's the greatest legacy anyone can leave, proof that no matter how broken we feel, no matter how impossible happiness seems, there's always hope. There's always the possibility of love. There's always tomorrow, waiting with its promise of something better. Clara and Harrison found that tomorrow together, and in doing so, they created a love story that would inspire generations to come. A story that whispers to every broken heart, you are not beyond repair. You are not too damaged to love again. You are not alone in your pain. Healing is possible. Joy can return. Love awaits if only you're brave enough to reach for it. Their journey from grief to joy, from isolation to connection, from brokenness to wholeness, stands as eternal proof that the human heart is more resilient than we imagine, that love is more powerful than pain, and that happy endings are possible even for those who have experienced the deepest sorrow. This is their story, a testament to hope, to healing, and to the transformative power of love that doesn't seek to fix, but simply to cherish exactly what is.